Hello and welcome to another one of those auspicious days where we get another dev diary for the Imperator Rome mod, Imperator Invictus. To remind you what Invictus is, it is an attempt by the modders of the game Imperator Rome to create a community flavor pack of sorts to spice up a bit of the game for Imperator Rome after Paradox have unfortunately abandoned it potentially temporarily. And today we have the fourth dev diary for it. And today we're going to be talking about the Galatian Invasion and also a release date where you will be able to get your hands on Imperator Invictus and enjoy what these modders are up to and what they're doing, and that's pretty exciting. So let us get into this and talk about Imperator Invictus once more. Salvete, readers. Perhaps you have visited Oracle last week, or perhaps our teasers are quite a bit revealing, but many of you have guessed what we can now confirm. Invictus will feature the long-awaited Galatian Invasion. Today, J. Philipponus and Palando will be describing the grand event sequence and Celtic setup required to pull this feat off, with some added flavour, comments from our localization aide, Stefan, I think. For those too lazy to read the entire dev diary, the release date announcement is at the bottom. Also, you could just watch this video and then if you're too lazy to read the dev diary, then I'll read it for you. Of course, I'm not calling everyone, this is a terrible idea. I realize now that I may have accidentally just called you all lazy. That is not what I mean. I don't mean that you're lazy at all. Maybe you just really like the sound of my voice. That is entirely possible and honestly expected at this point. Let's move on, shall we? So, the Galatian setup. When we think about the Celts, we often think about the Gauls and Britain. There was, however, a major Celtic population located in Pannonia and Transylvania, which gave us one of the most famous quotes about Celts, Vae Victis, meaning woe to the vanquished, as well as the most famous military campaigns against the Mediterranean world, a fact that the lucky 0.1% of Imperator players know who have gotten this achievement. And of course, I am indeed one of those. I unlocked it on the 15th of May at... Oh god, was it that late? Okay, fair enough. Of course, I have this achievement. It was relatively difficult, I would say. It's a fun one. You should totally try it. I would recommend giving it a go. Get that number up a bit. But yeah, Brennus's Revenge. Let's see more people have that, please. So, the first written mention of the Celts in the Balkans dates to 335 BC and describes an episode between Alexander the Great and a Celtic envoy. The king received them kindly and asked them, while drinking, what it was that they most feared, thinking that they would say himself. But they replied that they feared nothing except the sky might fall upon them. Okay, chicken lickin'. Although, indeed, they added they put above everything else the friendship of such a man as he. Another Celtic envoy reached Alexander the Great in 324 BC in Babylon, which is quite a hefty distance away. It's quite likely the Celtic envoys were able to gather information about Anatolia and its riches during this journey. These encounters with the wealth of the Hellenic world sparked the Celts' interest, and it's no wonder they would seek to claim it for themselves. The first attempt in 298 BC was not successful, but around 2 decades later an invasion was launched that would stop the Hellenic world in its tracks, and which is the feature of our event sequence. In order to recreate the conditions for this massive Celtic invasion to take place, a change of the setup was needed, as most of the Celtic players were absent in the base game. First off, the 3 Galatian tribes Trochmia, Tectosagia and Tolistobogia, together with their historic leaders, were added to Pannonia. Players who have undertaken a Gaul campaign will know that Tectosagia already exists in the game. Indeed, these 2 separate nations in the game originated from the same tribe. Another Scordiscian tribe, Calegrea, was added so that there are 3 major Scordiscian tribes which each will try invading a target. More on that below. So we have the new setup in Pannonia here, and I believe we have a comparison a little bit lower as well, but we'll get to that in a moment. Another quite unique challenge start for the player to pick in this area, the Transylvanian Celts, depicted by Anartia, as they start with most of their pops being Dacian, while their ruling class is Celtic. Sure, that could be an interesting one. Personally, I'd prefer to just conquer the land. I mean, there's not a whole lot of land there. Although I suppose you could just conquer someone else and then, maybe they'll be of your culture. But yeah, definitely a challenging start to have that kind of thing happen. Furthermore, we also changed the setup of the neighbouring Illyrians as well as Noricum to fix some happy accidents from Imperator's release version and make it on par with the other reworked parts of the world like Anatolia. One final but important change to the setup was reverting the split-off of the Pannonian Celts from the Gallic ones, because migrants included into Pannonia starting from the 4th century BC and continued to do so well until the game's timeframe, i.e. it did not make sense to represent them as a separate branch. So if you don't know about this, all of the Celtic countries, all the Celtic cultures were one big, massive, unified culture group. And this was changed to be the Gallic culture group, the Pannonian culture group, and the Belgican culture group. And I guess what they've done here is re-merge the Pannonian Celts with the Gallic Celts. So you're going to have not so many issues if you are one or the other conquering the other. Alright, so the Scordiskia are now located in modern-day Slovenia together with Bohemia. They later on control much of Pannonia. Noricum was formerly divided into 4 equal zones, which you can see as a totally different setup now. So this is the new setup, and here is the old one. So Norica, I guess, has reclaimed a little bit of the past, but now there's some new smaller nations. Abyssinia has been murdered, basically. Rhaetia's lost a bit of land, it seems. And this Aulentia is a merger of some of this, maybe? Interesting. It's hard to really make out all of the differences, but yeah, there's certainly some differences there. Carenia and Latabicia have also been murdered to make way for these two. Catinia's dead in favor of these two. Be nice if they were side-by-side images, if I'm being honest. I can't show both of them at the same time. Side-by-side, please, next time. Thank you. But yeah, some differences there. Makes it a little bit of a more interesting setup, perhaps. Yeah, good stuff. So, on to the invasion itself. From J. Philoponus, or Glory Glory Byzantium. I've worked on a variety of mods in the past and have my hands in quite a few exciting projects here for Invictus. I've always been a bit troubled that one of the more premier events for Anatolia in antiquity, the Galatian Invasion, was not included. One can even see the event as the closing chapter in the Diadochi era. Also, Diadochi, Diadochi. Just get all the pronunciations in because I know someone's going to get pissed and I don't care. As it occurred not long after the passing of Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Seleucus, all within 2 years' time, and wreaked havoc in the Hellenic world. After this event, much of the historiography of the Hellenistic period for the next century is lost to us. With that grand context in mind, an event sequence has been crafted to help the AI simulate these events in a dynamic and flexible way. Players have always had the option of picking up a migratory tribe and forming Galatia via decision, and there's going to be more on player interactions later. But the AI never seems to make such an attempt. Indeed, there are technical barriers related to AI migration, but we found a way to work around them via event sequence. Just as every player in the Eastern Mediterranean enjoys seeing the aftermath of the Fourth War event, so we hope that you can scan over the map of Greece and Anatolia and smile when you see civilized barbarians farming their new pastures. As mentioned above, historically the invasions occurred around 281 BC. More important than the date was the chaotic situation the Epigonii inherited. The Antigonids and an exiled son of Ptolemy who ruled Thrace were vying for the Macedonian throne, while Antiochus was busy consolidating his rule over Anatolia after he inherited a massive realm. As such, the event sequence is triggered dynamically. And we have the event conditions there. If Pella is not owned by Macedon or the Seleucids, if Pella is not owned by Macedon, or the Seleucids own land in the Phrygian region, the event will begin. I'd say that's it's not going to happen every single time, but I'd say that's going to happen in maybe 70% of your games. Because quite frequently the Antigonids will take Macedon, but not fully kill Macedon, so Macedon will still exist, just elsewhere. And the Seleucids I'd say 50% of the time, manage to get land in Anatolia. The keen observer may safely disregard the data and maps that are in the screenshots below. This context is only used for testing purposes. While the invasions were part of a confederation of various tribes which split off in different directions, for gameplay reasons, the invasions will be wars of conquest by multiple Gallic nations residing in the Upper Balkans. The first begins with Dindaria attacking Pella. As modders do not have access to directly trigger migration, the invaders will spawn a large army right on the doorstep of their intended target. The lack of time to prepare should emulate the shock factor these invasions give to the Greeks seeking to defend their cities. So unless you are, unless you are aware that this is going to be a thing that happens, you're probably not going to have an army stationed in your capital, and if they just straight up spawn right next to you, that's gonna be a bit of a shock. I would argue that it's a good thing for the game, but I believe there are going to be some people, if this was vanilla, there would be some people that would be a little bit miffed by it. Though again, if you are owning Pella, either you are Macedon or you've conquered it, so you should know that this event would be coming. Unless it's your first ever run, maybe, we'll see. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of setup. It's going to cause some people to be fairly annoyed, I feel, but deal with it, I guess. Alright, next we have Scordiskia attacking Delphi, which was the topic of the Twitter teaser that was posted yesterday, which I have unfortunately not gotten up right now. They spawn in the pass north of Thermopylae, where they were historically defeated by a coalition of Greeks. To simulate this defense, all Greek states in central Greece get a summons to war within a few days, an option which the AI will always take. So there'll be a big army spawning, and then or rather there'll be a call to arms for all these Greeks that will join. Then they'll spawn in, battle possibly start here, and we'll see if that one succeeds. I suppose that's got a lesser chance of succeeding. Rounding up the European theatre of invasions, Calegaria moves east to take on the owner of Mesembria in their attempt to establish a short-lived kingdom of Tylis. And that's another 25,000, which is, in this period, in what's that, like 10 years into the game? It's kind of huge. It's kind of like a big army, especially if you have to fight, if you own all three. Say if you're Thrace, right? I think Thrace is going to be the one to trigger this the most, because as Thrace you're going to want to conquer Macedon, and you probably will be taking Pella fairly easily. I would say that Thrace will also own Mesembria. They'll probably also own Delphi by the time this fires. So you're going to have to be fighting against 75,000 Gauls within the very early parts of the game, and that's pretty huge. That is pretty huge. Finally, we come to the most famous and successful of these invasions. With a modified setup by Palando, we can now send 3 Volcae nations on their historic journey. Tolistobogia, Tektasagia, and Trokmeri combine to attack a wide region in Anatolia. Each nation will declare their own separate war, which may lead to different war defenders depending on who owns the land in question. And as Thrace, if the Antigonids explode in a certain way, you can end up owning this land. So you could end up having to fight another 100,000 on top of that. That's a lot. That is a lot. 175,000 within the space of a few short years. No country will have that. That would be enough to defeat the Mauryans if it was all aimed in the right direction. So if these events fire, I expect the AI for sure will not be able to handle it. And we'll probably end up seeing Galatian nations, which is kind of cool. Historically, Antiochus defeated the Gauls in the Battle of the Elephants, but gave them land in exchange for their subject status. To simulate this occurrence, a scripted peace offer is sent to each defender after a certain amount of time in war. While any defender who is a player has the option to fight on, the AI will always take the peace deal. We may explore more dynamic resolution in the future, but the contingencies of the war made this approach the most feasible for now. The full land distribution given out by the peace deal roughly corresponds to the historical borders of the 3 tribes which will form Galatia. So, yeah, you won't have to fight them. Oh, it's actually 150,000. Was there another? There's another 50,000 that I missed here. 150 plus the 75. It's a lot. It is a lot. 225,000. Wow. Alright, so that's what you'll end up seeing if you'll probably not end up having it form in the Antigonids. They'll come after the Antigonids have exploded. But these are the borders that they will end up with, which is kind of cool. Next comes the settlement. Ideally, after the war, the migration units turn on their swords into plowshares and settle in. But as mentioned above, migration features are not directly moddable, and we've had to use a few tricks to simulate the effects. So an event will trigger which moves all Gallic pops from the Balkan provinces over to their new Anatolian home. As you see below, the new Gallic pops reside in a sea of locals from Anatolia, making cultural integration a significant challenge. Finally, the military units spawned by the initial event are still shown here. These may be removed, or I guess settled, as they would for a settled migratory unit, or maybe utilized for other purposes to be disclosed at a later date. So I guess if you are... Oh wow, if you are playing as one of these nations, you'll end up having a relatively decent-sized country with an extra 50 pops that you can do whatever you want with. Including, I guess, you could invade whoever you've just beaten here, siege their land, and settle on the sieges, growing your territory that way as well. That's potential. Or you could just settle to get yourself a very homogenous country. Or attempt to get a homogenous country. So yeah, it's kind of cool. Cool idea. There's also an event for the disparate Gallic culture pops to merge into a single Galatian culture, which constitutes a separate branch in Celtic cultures, indicating their divergence over time from practices of the Celtic homelands. So there's going to be, okay, a different culture group. Interesting. So what would happen to your pops already? Would they all be shifted at like the Macedonian Hellenic thing going on? Maybe it's using the Pannonian culture group and repurposing it. That would be pretty cool. Alright, lovely stuff. Speaking of shifting cultures, it would be insufficient to place these Celts in their new home and not let them change their flag to the most beautifully hideous emblem in the game. Yeah, that blue on orange is... It's a thing. Because the decision to form Galatia requires even more real estate, which the AI may not seek out, and which we also did not want to give away freely by the event above, the new nation will form via event after a certain amount of time. Any existing Gallic nation with land in the Phrygia region will be absorbed into the new country with various buffs given from the decision, keeping in mind that these tribes lose their homeland in Pannonia after the migration. So yeah, they'll lose all their land in Pannonia, they'll come down, settle into 3 tribes, and then after a certain amount of time, they will merge into one Galatian nation, which is kind of cool. The sequence will hopefully allow the player to look over at Anatolia a few decades into the game and smirk when they see an impish shade of cyan they're not used to seeing, or perhaps Pergamon and Mithridatic players may let out a groan at the new enemy on their doorstep. As for the playing through the event as an invader, Palando has designed a mission tree to guide each potential tribe to the new home. That's kind of cool. I like that. Together with Glory Glory Byzantium, which is J. Philoponus, these tasks will be integrated with the above invasion event to allow the player to feel they're part of a multinational grand migration. We hope this gives an improved immersion experience for those wanting to form Galatia or its corresponding European counterpart in an alt history run. That's awesome. I'm so down for this. This is exactly the kind of thing I was hoping that Invictus would do, right? These kind of flavorful event-based events, right? It's not just an event as a pop-up where you can click a button, but like an entire event sequence with far-reaching consequences. I like it a lot. I like it a hell of a lot. This is really good stuff. This is exactly what I was hoping for, and I would like to see more. I don't know what other things could be done with it. Maybe something to do with Bactria is like the thing that's popping into my head. But these kind of big set piece events is perfect, and I'm down for it. I'm definitely here for it. And finally, before we go, there is also an announcement for the release date. We have a release date for you. The Oracle has spoken on the 30th of June, bearing in mind, as I record this, it is the 8th of June. The mod will be uploaded to the Steam Workshop and the Paradox mod store, just in time for the summer holidays, so everyone can enjoy the mod in full. Assuming everything goes to plan, and, you know, disclaimer, plans can change and there may be delays. If that happens, just know that it's for a good reason, but, you know, things can change. Everything we have leaked will be in the mod from day one, and there will also be some content we won't have leaked. But for that, you'll have to wait a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, we've got a few more dev diaries to come before that time. So I will, for sure, be going over each and every one of them, pointing out the cool things, critiquing the less than cool things, and all of that. But that will have to that'll happen when it happens, because for right now, that's enough for this video. Thank you all very much for watching. If you want to keep up to date with all Imperator Invictus news and updates, like button, subscribe button, bell button, button, and all the buttons. And yeah, thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.